Hello everybody, welcome to another video. I've had a few requests to talk about shields in this game. I'm gonna start off by saying that when it comes to blocking enemies in Dark Souls 2, you want a shield that has good weight to stability ratio as well as physical damage resistance. That's pretty much it. You don't really want a shield that blocks any spells or magic or anything like that. Now things change a little bit when you're talking about PvP, but I'll get into that later on. So why do I say you need shields that only block physical damage? Because most of the enemies that cast spells at you in Dark Souls 2, the spells can be easily avoided unless it's some sort of rare invader like Dennis. But when you're fighting Dennis, you probably want a dedicated shield to sorceries. Or you can just dodge the sorceries like most people do in PvP. So enemies that come to mind that use spells are in Shrine of Amana, as well as those desert sorceresses in Harvest Valley. The Shrine of Amana ones you can just dodge out of the ways very easily by just moving your character. And the desert sorceresses, you probably don't want to block them anyways because they do a lot of stamina damage. Because that is the thing when you're blocking spells. Bosses are also off limits, and bosses like the Smelter Demon who have fire and magic at the end of the weapon, you don't really want to be blocking them either. So when it comes to elemental protection on shields, in most instances you just want to dodge out of the way and don't block it at all. For PvP, if you want to block spells, now again, most players just dodge spells because the other person needs to stand still as well as use stamina to cast spells. So they are putting themselves at a disadvantage if they don't time this right. Good options for blocking spells is a magic shield. You can get it in the Undead Crypt and infuse it with magic. The Transgressor shields blocks a lot of dark. The Sun Parma or the Watcher shield blocks a lot of lightning. And the Phoenix Parma, you can get this in the Iron Keep, that one blocks a lot of fire. That's the thing you kind of have to do when you're thinking about blocking spells, is find one dedicated shield, ideally a small shield, that blocks the spell that you're trying to block, and then go all out for blocking only that one spell. Anyways, let's talk about blocking physical damage. When it comes to blocking physical damage with shields, there aren't very many that I would recommend, because when you look at it simply, it really matters how much the shield weighs, how much stability the shield has, which is essentially how much stamina you're keeping when the enemy is hitting you, and how much physical damage the shield blocks. So something like the Drangleic shield can be pretty good. However, if that shield weighs too much for your character to feasibly wield, it is not a bad idea to use something like the large leather shield or the Silver Eagle Kite Shield, which you can buy in Majula. I personally wouldn't fixate too much on how much physical damage a shield blocks, as long as it's around over 90. Depends on the enemy you're fighting, how early in the game, how much health and stuff like that you have. But if you're a defensive character who likes to use shields, your primary stats to level up should be health and stamina. Small shields, I wouldn't recommend using any of them to block. Now, when it comes to the medium category, that's probably what most players use to block damage. I would say the Drangleic shield is really good. The Royal Kite Shield, which you can buy from Macduff, that one's really good. And the absolute best medium-sized shield for blocking damage is the Defender shield. This is like an upgrade to pretty much all the other medium-sized shields because it has 60 stability at only 5 units of weight. That is absolutely insane. So that should be the target to shoot for. Now, when it comes to Greatshields, I see this very often. People will use extremely heavy shields. There is one Greatshield that is, in my opinion, the best for blocking physical damage. If you really want to turtle up and you don't want to spend a lot of points in vitality or strength to carry one of the larger shields, the Twin Dragon Greatshield is fantastic. This thing can carry you through the whole beginning of the game, essentially. You can get it from Mullen in Majula as well, and it blocks 95 physical damage. But the beautiful thing about it is that it has 65 stability, and a lot of enemies will bounce when they hit your shield. When you compare the Twin Dragon Greatshields to other Greatshields, they all weigh an insane amount of weight in comparison. This thing only weighs 7 units, and also they take more strength to use. Unless your health is very low, I wouldn't worry about the chip damage that you're going to be taking through this shield. Life gems are practically infinite, and if you're a character who likes to block, then health and stamina are probably going to be the most important statistics to put points into, which means when your health pool is bigger, it becomes less dangerous to take a little bit of chip damage through your shield. This shield is kind of one that the players who know about it, they know about it. It is very overlooked and extremely good for, like I mentioned, its weight. Now, I would say that you should probably try as best as you can to go without a shield as often as you can, because when you get to the later NG pluses, blocking enemies and bosses becomes unreasonable. They do too much stamina damage, no matter which shield you have, as well as there are certain scenarios where relying on a shield is almost impossible, such as against certain bosses. I would just recommend that you try to practice without a shield as much as possible. Now, there are some areas where I use shields because there are areas in this game that are just unreasonable, and there are a lot of ganks. Places that come to mind are Earthen Peak, Iron Keep, maybe certain sections in the Forest of Fallen Giants where there's a lot of ganks. For these places, of course, keep a shield, but the most effective way to do damage in Dark Souls 2 is to two-hand your weapon, and the most effective way to end fights is to end them as quickly as possible. Now, there are a lot of shields. There are over 70 shields in Dark Souls 2, so of course some of them are going to have utilities for specific places. Let's talk a little bit about parrying shields, because I think this is one of the better things to use shields for. The buckler and the target shield. Like I've mentioned, you don't really want to worry about blocking with these two, as well as you don't want to worry about the magic defense that these have. So you should probably just use the buckler because it's the lightest, even though the target shield has better stats. These shields are for parrying. They have a lot more parry frames than other shields, but they also lock you in animation for longer, so you won't be able to roll away if you miss a parry or something. I think it's a good introduction for parrying. There are a couple of other shields that have this parry thing as well, like the Phoenix Parma, and I think the Mannequin Shield maybe has a parrying frame as well. Now, another thing that you can parry are spells. This is a little bit just for style points, because you can't hit the enemy back with the spells that they fling at you, but it is something that can be done if for some reason you feel like you want to do that. Maybe you can parry a boss's AoE attack and stay within its range. I've never tried that. I'm not sure if that works. But yeah, this is very risky, and it doesn't really have the reward that normal parrying has, because even though you may stay close to the boss, you can't really do critical attacks or anything like that. There are some shields that can be pretty useful for other things. There's a shield called the Blossom Kite Shield that gives you stamina back. I believe there's one more, but this one is a lot more difficult to get and a lot heavier. The Insolent Shield. I would recommend just use the Blossom Kite Shield. You can put this on your back and it acts kind of like a Chloranthy ring. But this shield has kind of like two utilities. I like to use it in Earthen Peak because the mannequins do bleed damage, and this thing has fairly decent bleed defense, and it doesn't weigh too much, plus you're getting the stamina upgrade for it. This shield is definitely one to keep in mind, and I do think that is one of the better ones for that. Not for the blocking necessarily, but for the fact that the thing is that mannequins will bounce when they hit this shield. So if you have a fast weapon, it's very important that you combine it with a fast weapon if you're using it against mannequins, because if you have like a great hammer or a great sword, even though you block and they bounce, you may not have time to hit them before they hit you again. They hit extremely quickly, those enemies. Another one is the Watcher Dragon Parma. A little bit of a hidden effect that this shield has is that it raises your luck. So again, another shield that gets like 2 for 1. Both of these are medium size, which means that smaller enemies like mannequins, like the soldiers in the Forest of Fallen Giants, given that they use their weapons with one hand, they will bounce when they hit these shields. So it would stop the attack combo completely. But this thing gives you item discoveries. It's pretty cool. And if you want maximum item discovery, this is one of the pieces that you have to equip. Another awesome shield that unfortunately you get very late in the game is the Vessel Shield. This thing is a little bit heavy for the stats that it has, but depending on what you're doing, it can be really useful. It raises some of your stats. I believe it raises your health, your strength and dex by 4, your adaptability, as well as your intelligence and faith. So this shield is really good for like soul level 1 runs. Like I mentioned, the Defender Shield is one you want to shoot for because it's significantly better than the Defender Sword. And you have to choose between those two when you have the Defender Soul. Reeve and Orma's Great Shield are, you can power stance these two, but they take a lot of strength and they wouldn't be better than using a Great Hammer. They do strike damage, so they can do some serious damage to certain bosses. But yeah, Great Hammer is probably better. The Wicked Eye Great Shield can be used in regeneration builds, as well as the Lois Shield. So that's sort of the little quirky thing about them. And Havel's is absolutely huge. It's very heavy and it has defenses to pretty much everything. The lowest defenses on it are 70. This thing also has 75 stability, which is the highest in the game, along with the Gurm Great Shield. I would say that if you're turtling up, the only shields that you should really take a look at is the Twin Dragon Great Shield for early game, the Gurm Great Shield for maybe medium to late game, and Havel's Great Shield for super duper late game. But when you use Havel's Great Shield in later NG pluses, the enemies still tear through your stamina, even with the best shield in the game. At later NG pluses, blocking doesn't really become an option, essentially rendering all the shields in the game useless, the ones that are for blocking anyways, which is a little bit unfortunate. So yeah, summarizing through what I've said, The parrying shields can be very good for parrying as you're learning to parry. There are a couple of medium-sized shields to consider, such as the large leather shield, the silver eagle kite shield, dragon lake shield, defender shield should ultimately be your best medium-sized shield, blossom kite, as well as watcher dragon Parma. The vessel shield can be pretty decent. The twin dragon great shield, havels and germs, and yeah, that's about it. Like, that's the thing where when it comes to shield, like if you are a character who wants to be, use a shield essentially, if you want a great shield, use the twin dragon. If you want a medium-sized shield, use the dragon lake, use the pizza shield, or use the royal kite shield until you get the defender shield. There is like nothing else in between. There are a lot of shields in this game, but a lot of them are also just simply made useless because you don't really block poison that often. You don't really block bleed that often. There are a few enemies where you have to do that, or you might have to do that, but for the most part, you don't really block elemental damage. You just block physical, and then when it comes to that, there are only 3 stats to consider, which means that there will be some shields that are better than others across the board when it comes to blocking physical damage. So let's say you're a character who wants to play through your new game of Dark Souls 2. How should you use a shield? Well, there are certain weapons that are better than others. I'd say weapons that you can attack the enemy easily and quickly with at close range. Things like the longsword come to mind. Maces and hammers for armored enemies, but it's really important that if you're using a shield against smaller enemies who attack really quickly, that the weapon that you choose to fight those enemies is also very fast and ideally hits side to side, something like a claymore for example. But yeah, ultimately blocking can be pretty useful for new players. It kind of gives you a layer of safety. However, like I did mention, at later NG pluses it becomes kind of useless. You might have a difficult time in the game if all you've gotten used to is blocking with a shield and you don't really know how to dodge and stuff like that properly. There are some strategies that you can use when you're fighting enemies in Dark Souls 2, because the most effective way to avoid an attack is to bait the enemy to attack and just move out of the way. You don't dodge and you don't roll. You simply just move out of the distance of the attack and then perform a running attack, for example. Running attacks are another thing that are extremely important for closing the distance between you and the enemy. This way they don't even have a chance to attack you. And if you two-hand your weapon, you will be able to stagger the enemy more consistently. This is why, for example, speedrunners will just two-hand a rapier and tear through the whole game. Now, not everybody can play like a speedrunner, of course, but that means that the tactics that they use do work and they are the most effective. They don't work in every scenario, or you have to be extremely good for them to work in every scenario. However, that should be the thing that you strive for, because Dark Souls 2 animations are not that fast. The stamina regeneration in this game is not that high, and you're generally a little bit slower than the other Souls games. So baiting enemies to attack you with the mindset of, okay, I'm gonna let them attack me, but I know what I'm gonna do, and that's to move out of the way and then proceed to attack them. That is a really effective tactic to use. Also circling bosses so that they miss their hits. You don't have to block, you don't have to dodge, and you get in a counter attack as well. That is essentially the most effective way to play. But it is a little bit advanced, and of course it takes some time to get used to. Anyways, that was it for this video. Hopefully I didn't disappoint too many people with the shields. I do think still, like I mentioned, that it is very good for new players to use shields. But yeah, that was all for now. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.